Where did you like to play as a child? I ask this question a lot because childhood memories shape us into the people we become. Welcome to Play It Forward, a Wearthy podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Ritson. Thanks so much for joining me. I talk a lot about play. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm an educator, and I'm a playground designer. So I want to gather some of my favourite people who are advocates of children and nature and create a space to have an honest conversation about getting more kids outside. The power of play is very often underestimated, and I think we all need a little more play in our lives.
Today's guest considers herself as a Playwork evangelist. She's directed and produced an incredible short documentary about adventure playgrounds that has been affectionately coined as a horror film for hover parents. And it's called The Land. It's personally one of the biggest influences on my play journey back in the early days as I was going down the rabbit holes of play to try to understand it a bit more, and to see the engagement in this film and the application and the grace of those people working with the children was like, I've got to be a part of this. I've got to understand more. She also has a Playwork podcast. She's a mum, and the Wearthy team thinks she's awesome. Today, we're chatting about Playwork, getting beyond the junkyard with adventure playgrounds, risky play, of course, and a whole lot more. With a big, warm welcome via Zoom all the way from stunning Vermont. Thank you for joining us, Erin Davis.
Thank you. This is very exciting. Glad to talk to you.
Quite an intro. No pressure. But thank you so much for joining us. And like I mentioned in that intro, like been a huge influence on me. So it's really awesome. And
I can't believe it. It's great.
The film I've recommended the most in my life would be this one.
Okay. Wow.
So as we do
kind.
with all our guests, we start by taking a little stroll down memory lane. Where did you like to play as a child?
Yeah, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a city neighborhood with, there were 10 to 12 kids who lived in the neighborhood. We had a street with houses, trees to climb, sidewalks, dogs to walk. And I was thinking about this, our radius was probably no more than 100 yards and included 3 or 4 homes that we all kind of triangulated between. We occasionally would venture beyond that to go to the store and buy candy, but mostly we were, in that little bubble. And at least that's how I remember it. And we watched a lot of TV, but we played outside a lot. We had the sort of classic, playful American childhood.
Suburbia?
Well, it wasn't suburban,
Yes.
but maybe in your imagination, it sort of looked like that, but cooler, I would say. Anyway, yeah, water fights, leaf piles, riding bikes, built ramps, slip and slides, snow days. We had a lot of, many of us were latchkey kids, so we were home after school without our parents, and in the summer, a lot of times without our parents, just kind of screwing around.
What did you say? Is something kids there?
Latchkey kids, we came home
Latchkey,
with a house key around our neck, and let ourselves in.
I have not heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
When I think of that American childhood, what stands out to me is actually enjoying the seasons. And being here on the Gold Coast, we don't really get proper seasons.
I mean, it's a very specific American childhood, informed by our the jobs that our parents had and the houses that we were lucky to be living in. And but yes, we did have 4 seasons. And actually, I don't think it's in my office now, but a lot of times I have this photo of us all piled on top of each other on a snow day. And when I talk about play, a lot of times I reference snow days, like those days, that feeling you get when all of a sudden your schedule is clear, like you were supposed to be doing this one thing, but it gets canceled. You're supposed to go to school, school's canceled. So what do you do with your time? What is it that you choose to do with your time? That's sort of how I start getting my college students thinking about it when I'm working with them here. Yeah, because it's hard to access that feeling as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of oh, cool, I get to, what do I actually want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to do first?
And the environment is offered that arena because despite snowing, you've
Yeah.
Got rid of the supervision. Like no
Right.
parent's going to go seagull you and stand over you and squawk out in the cold. They're like,
Not when it's freezing.
go do your thing. It's too cold.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the
Yeah, it's
elements
true.
were on
Snow
your
does
side.
offer some freedom there. Yeah, definitely.
And it's a loose part.
Totally.
How-
And nobody
how-
cares about it. It's not precious, right? It's not like the lawn or
Yeah.
the leaves that you're tossing out of a pile that someone raked. It's like the snow's gonna melt and it'll be
yeah.
all over soon.
It paints a beautiful picture of like this natural element that offers these
Mm-hmm.
same outcomes and benefits as loose parts.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
And also you've just got that novelty, wonderment, adventure. And it comes down to you were getting
Right.
that affordance of time, freedom, and possibilities.
And a surprise, you wake up in the morning and you look out the window and everything's different. So
Yeah.
there's like a excitement to explore.
And how did that experience contribute to what you do today?
I don't know.
And what did that journey look like? How did you get there? How did you get to Playwork? How did you get to the land? I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so how does that playful childhood affect me today? I've been thinking about this and I just don't know. I think it's just in me now. I don't know if there's like a straight line to anything necessarily, but if it's just baked into me now, those experiences. And I think that if anything, maybe that sensation like deep in my brain is like a touchstone that I carry around, like so that when I'm doing something else in my adult life, that's good. If I'm doing the right thing in my life, it like resonates with those playful experiences. Does that make sense? I was trying to sort of think about that. Like I have because of that playful freedom that I had in my childhood, I like have experienced and can like recognize what feels right for me and what feels good in my adult life. Maybe.
Yeah. And what I hear there is like every time you're thinking about it and reflecting on it, you're bringing that positivity and emotion and the physiological state into the present. And you're making it now as well.
I think that is what feels like carries through is the physiological, whatever the physiological state is, that's what's still alive in the adult version of me.
That's a perfect Playwork response, by the way. You're like, what? I don't know. What's the possibilities? Let's see. Let's explore.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Don't try and name it. Just be in the moment. So, I mean, how I ended up at the land. Okay, so basically, it was 2010, and I was living in New York City, working as a nanny, among other things, keeping my head above water. And I read an article in the New Yorker. I was just living my life, reading this, that, the other, and I picked up a New Yorker magazine and I read an article called "State of Play" by Rebecca Mead. And this is in 2010, and she was writing about the Imagination Playground that had just been installed in the south side of Manhattan. And the article is very interesting. If you haven't read it, it's really cool. It sort of tells the story of the evolution of playgrounds in New York City, why they were developed, and blah, 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 blah. And I was nannying at the time, so I was like, great, let's go. Let's go to this new playground. And the big sort of special thing about the Imagination Playground is these loose parts, these big, do you know the Imagination Playground blocks? Those big foam blue blocks?
Yeah.
So that was the first time I had heard of those blocks. They're developed, designed by a really amazing designer named Cass Holman. And, the Imagination Playground had water, sand, loose parts, and these people who worked there called playworkers. And, in the sort of like footnotes of this article was the fact that this was informed by something called an adventure playground that came around in the UK by a woman named Lady Allen of Herdwood. And I was like, well, what's that? And kind of, I just fell down the rabbit hole. You Google image search adventure playground once and you find so much cool stuff. There was just really no turning back after that. I was intrigued by, the name Playwork. Like, who are these people who have to learn, who have to be trained to be playful? What does that mean? And I just started like meeting people and emailing people. I don't know. I just cared all of a sudden. I don't know why. I just cared and was really, really just curious. It's just really, truly interested.
I relate because by watching The Land and then going down these Google rabbit holes of adventure, and it's like, oh yeah, this is where it started. No, that's not where it started. It goes back further.
Yeah.
And then
my gosh.
the influence of that and where it is now and the perception.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing was learning about how you can actually go and study play work. For me, I was like, you can what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also it be acknowledged in the UK as well. I'm not familiar with if it's recognized in the States, but it's not recognized in Australia, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, only in a very small way, I would say. A meaningful but small way. So I actually didn't find The Land at first. At first, I just got really interested in the imagination playground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my obsession with this, I saw an announcement that the architects who designed the imagination playground were giving a talk in New York at some like architecture center. So it was free. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll go. And I go there. It's an architecture center in New York. Everyone's super cool and everything. And I sit there and listen to the talk. And at the end, ask a question. And I say, you talk about all these benefits that the kids are getting. They're learning physics. They're doing this, they're whatever, doing conflict resolution, stuff like that. And I was I can't remember exactly what I said, but basically I was like, how do you know that that's happening? And why is that so important to you? Like, what's so important about that to you? At the end of the talk, everyone's milling about and I'm like getting ready to leave as quickly as possible because I'm basically embarrassed. And this person comes up to me and they say, hi, my name is Morgan Lecter Saxby. I think we would like each other, basically. And she is Morgan Lecter Saxby, who's a co-founder of Pop-Up Adventure Play.
Yeah.
And we're now very good friends. And she invited me to a pop-up event that they were doing and sort of like gently held my hand into the Playwork world and introduced me to other people. And so I started calling people and spoke with Penny Wilson at one point, who said, maybe I think you might actually like this new place called The Land. You should go check it out, or give Claire a call at The Land. And the rest is history, I guess.
There you are. What was the difference you saw in the children you nannied at the imagination playground compared to where you were taking them previously?
I think what's interesting about my experience with that family is that those kids were so smart and bright and silly and curious and fun. And I was under the impression, based on the media that I had seen about children at the time, that children were lazy, bored, incapable, terrible. Their childhood was being wasted away on screens. I was like, that's not true. These kids are great. These kids are smart, cool, whatever. They read, they fight, they watch TV, whatever. And so I was very intrigued by like the dissonance between the way the public was talking about children and these actual children in front of me. So that was one thing. And also I was living in New York City, and they were, like a middle-class family, basically, and upper middle class family, I guess. And their kid, I was very aware of the lack of privacy that the kids had. They're never out of eyesight of an adult. They just aren't. And they live in a 2-bedroom apartment, like they're never out of earshot of an adult. And I was always just kind of like aware of that and aware of like, I don't know. I was just aware of that, I guess. I'm like, how can kids have privacy or like a semblance of privacy? And that's something that I feel like The Land offers children in its sort of in its sort of weird way. Like, even though there are adults there, they're not there in the same way that quote normal adults are there. They offer the children a sense of privacy.
You're honoring the humanity of childhood and the right of that. For our listeners that aren't familiar with The Land,
right.
And I'm not going to try to describe it when I've got you right here that have delved so deeply into it. So can you give our listeners an overview of The Land?
I mean, The Land is a junk playground embedded in a neighborhood in northern Wales. And if you've never seen it, it's a junk playground. So it's a plot of land. It's about an acre, maybe less. It's not huge, but there's a lot going on there. It's full of stuff, just a bunch of crap everywhere. There's just crap everywhere. This is sort of like what it looks like when you walk in. You're like, there's just crap everywhere. There's old toys, buckets, keys, trees, balls, blankets, brooms, saws, a bike with no chain. There's a stream that kind of runs through it. So that, goes up and down. There's water, there's a fire pit, wigs, paint, dress ups. It's like everything's so spontaneous. There are things that are very, very small, like a marble. And then there are things that are very, very large, like a tree that you can climb. So it's very spontaneous, wild, chaotic looking environment initially when you first arrive. Yeah. And, while you're there, like, kids can do anything they want with anything they find. I guess that's important to know.
Yeah. And how did you, you went there, you saw it, and then what were the next steps in that journey to be able to go, okay, I'm going to do something with this?
It's life-changing. What can I say? Yeah. I mean, people who see it in a 20-minute video, it really affects their parenting and their work, like, permanently. Yeah. And I really just think of the film as like an attempt to just elevate what they do, or not, to broadcast it, just make it accessible to people who can't go there, because you see it and it speaks for itself, I think. Yeah. It's just so counterintuitive. It's just so crazy
it's
looking.
Something that doesn't make sense, that really challenges your perception of what a playground is, or what children should, inverted commas, be doing. But then you see it in action and you go, that makes sense. And it kind of ignites this, for so many people that I've had conversations with, it ignites this truth they already know, but they didn't realize.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I think that it gives people permission. I mean, it gives the children permission when they walk onto the land. They're like, oh, cool, I can make a mess. Oh, cool, I can make this space my own. Oh, cool, I can tidy this up. If I can do it, it's permissive. And I think when people see the film, it's like the spectrum of what is possible just widens, like the scope widens. Like, oh, maybe I don't need to clean up at the end of the day. Oh, maybe or whatever it is. I mean, everybody's different.
Yeah, and like the perception of it, that it is like this unsafe free for all, and it's kind of like an act of not caring from the adult's standpoint. It's like, you just do your thing type, but it's very, very intentional, but in a passive way, in the arena of input. Like what my takeaway was is that we try to give children resources constantly, and like, they don't need more resources. They don't need more things. We need to just create the environment, which gives them permission, because the first step's permission. They create the environment for them to flourish within it, and not have to go do the movement for them, not to go do the learning or the prescribing for them, and take that step back. How did you move into that community from as play workers, as an outsider, as a novice? Will you just get involved, or was it just participatory? You mean
at the land specifically?
Yeah, at the land specifically, yeah.
Oh my God, I was just like a ball of manic enthusiasm. You know what I mean? I think that like a lot of times you sort of, and I see people do this now, and I'm just like, oh my God, I do this, where you get so excited. And you're like, I know this. This is familiar. This feels right. I am like this. I can do this, and it's very like life affirming and exciting. And I was very like affirmed and excited to be there. And I think I sort of like became humbled. The longer that I was there, the more I worked with the material afterwards, the more I've studied and learned about Playwork afterwards. I've been very humbled by what happens there. In retrospect, I feel like I was so amazed. I just wanted to like soak it all up, and like I just wanted to soak it all up. And in the process of making the film, I hope it like kind of sank in a little bit. I don't know.
You achieved that for me, that's for sure. Yeah. I know that familiarity of the awkward stages of the
Yeah,
implementation.
because you
And it
just,
is
I
awkward
was
at
like,
the
oh
start.
wow. Right. It's like, oh, fire. Yeah. Kids should totally be allowed to have fire. Oh, yeah. Swearing. Yeah. Let them swear. Yeah. Like, be free, man. Like that was sort of like very exciting. It was very exciting about that space. And it's still like something very exciting about that space, but it's also specific. It's just so specific and special about that place. It's not like a checklist of things that one needs to have an adventure playground. You don't need to allow swearing. You don't need a fire pit. You don't need a saw. That's not what it's about. You know what I mean? So I think and a lot of people are, including me, I think I was very dazzled by those things initially, and they are dazzling.
Yeah.
And they are the culmination of like at the time, even almost a decade of relationship building and work that they were already doing. That's like deep. They were in deep at that point, and I just like dove in. Was like,
How
cool,
long
guys,
was
this
it
is
going
awesome.
when you came in?
So the playground itself, I think, they, as I recall, they would talk about it as the fence went up, because there's a 6-foot high privacy fence around up the whole thing, so no one has to look at it basically. And they say, the fence had been up for about a year when I got there, but they had been doing pop-up events, community events, and other just community projects for at least 7 years before that. So the neighborhood, the parents knew them, the kids knew them, they knew the kids' older siblings. They were really in deep there for sure.
So when it came to, like you mentioned, the relationships and the saws and the swearing and the fire pits, they're all things that would challenge like normal perception of what children should be doing. And in what you're saying there, yes, the families locally had accepted it and embraced it even. But you had to narrate a story or a message to people that are so far removed on it. So what was your approach in trying to deliver this challenging message? So I think our listeners and educators out there that are trying to sell these loose parts to parents would learn through your wisdom for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we started small. The film is short, and I don't think it's for beginners necessarily, for sure. Anyway, I mean, beginners see it and they have their own experience with it. But even regardless, we start small. We start with a risk that child take. You see it early in the film. You see a child taking a risk that an adult thinks is cute, right?
Yep.
She's swinging over a mud pit. There's a little girl on a rope swing, and she's trying to get from one side to the other of the mud pit. And she almost makes it and doesn't. She almost makes it again. And spoiler, she makes it in the end.
Beautiful.
And so the audience inevitably is like, yay, happy for her for sort of accomplishing
I
that.
smile thinking about it.
It's adorable. I mean, it's completely charming and sweet. And it's really cool. She's super proud of herself. Then things kick up a notch, I guess, in terms of the risk taking. A child climbs a tree. So that's like, we have a scene where a child climbs a tree and gets down. And that's a risk that a lot of adults remember taking, but haven't done in a while. You know what I mean? So they're like not as familiar with it though. And then things sort of that there's also like kids are playing with something with a mannequin, and like that sort of triggers a more like sort of like emotional risk and like emotional problems that adults or like issue that adults take issue with. My point is that we up the ante sort of throughout the 20 minutes. If you're trying to adopt a playwork practice in your environment, the lesson of the film in playwork itself is like start very small, time, space, and playwork. Like you don't need to hand out matches. You can have bubbles and have plenty of bubbles so that if they spill, it's not a problem. You can let the kids blow as many bubbles as they want. You can let them get sticky, whatever. I don't know what it is for that place. It doesn't have to be high gear right off the bat, and nor was the film.
Incremental steps is the overall tip
Incremental
there.
steps. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I like that point you made just there. It's we look at the land and we think of all of the physical risk.
Yeah.
But we have to acknowledge that emotional risk as well, especially in high risk communities, and how to work through that within your relationships, within the environment. And also dealing with that emotion is a part of the parent that's trying to implement it or expose their children to these situations. Like, yeah, I feel uncomfortable. I feel, and I'm like, that's okay. I'd much prefer you feel uncomfortable about your child maybe getting hurt than not. Most definitely.
It is I mean, I think the topic of like parenting and play work is also very interesting to me. Like, there's two totally different things, you know, like I would like to talk to more people about like, can you play work your own child? And I'm sort of like, if you ask me right now, I'd say like, basically, no, you can't. It's just not the job of the parent. My job as a parent, yes, of course, it's to like allow them to take risks and flourish, but you're still their parent.
Yeah.
So like, it's better to have you're lucky to have a play worker in your life who can support your child through their playful choices.
Yeah.
Without that sort of like reptile brain sort of jumping in and screwing everything up.
The react brain. Yeah, I've found that with my daughter. I've a daughter who's 7 and a son that's 4. And cool. Being proactive in the play and being an active or inactive participant, depending if they're dragging me in.
Right.
But one of the observations I made, my daughter started to have a default of me being the vessel to activate, not so much activate the play, but to be that security for her to feel safe and secure, to explore within a new environment with children. And it got to the stage where my daughter would come up and we'd be having a family gathering or a catch up at a park or whatever, a birthday party. And she'd come hold my hand. She's like, you're the children's adult. It's not your job to be with the adults. Your job's with the children. You're the children's adult.
Interesting. Yeah.
So there is, and then I had to be like, whoa, I don't want to be the driver of it. And that relationship and in that structure had to change.
So that you were less involved. You didn't want to be
as less involved. Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm not going to be there always. And I didn't want that to become a standard. Well, if I'm not there to offer the cues for her to run with, and then that was hard because, you know, coming to me constantly saying, but you're the children's adult, let's go. And I've got to be
my God.
Well, I'll be over soon. You start.
Yeah.
And I'll be there, and trying to create that bridge. And it's absolutely hard. So
parenting is this whole other bag of worms.
Yeah.
It's definitely been interesting sort of like learning about play work as a, like, not a parent and now being a parent. It's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't tell if they overlap a lot or not at all.
It's
or almost not at all. Not sure.
Once again, I think for me, I just go back to let's offer an environment for that opportunity to happen. And that's my responsibility as a parent, is just to expose the children to the environment where it can happen, not be the driver of the environment.
And in the film, you know, Claire says it so beautifully. She says, we watch the children that we work with and we see what interests them, and then we provide.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Watch
Yeah.
and provide.
And I love, there's another quote in there. It says, it's not your feeling of being uncomfortable which should inform your next move. It's the child that should inform the moves. You're like, I use that one all the time, especially when it comes over to those risk adverse people. And, you know, leveraging on that act of love, act of kindness, this emotion we have for the children in our lives. Let's work with that. But it means you work on that. You work with this emotional challenge. Like my daughter recently was up like a tree. It was like 7 meters high, sketchy. thin branches. And I'm just like, yep, okay, that's cool. I still had sweaty hands.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to tell her to get down. I wasn't going to tell her to be safe. I wasn't going to interject in any way. But it was like, I'm still nervous about that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, and I think there's a scene of tree climbing in the film too. And I think it's fair to say that Dave, who's the play worker at the land, there's a child up a tree. And I think it's fair to say that he was nervous about the situation.
Yeah.
And because the kid was high up and it had been snowing. And so the branches were like soaked with water. And he says, Ethan, or the kid, he says, a thicker branch than that snapped on me the other day. A line of information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It was a beautiful way of communicating his concern without being like, get the hell down from there.
Yeah. With that line of information, like it is so valuable. Time and time again, I witness an educator reframe and say, like, move away from the be careful or the authoritarian and just give them the information they need to make an informed decision for themselves. And I see, I now I look for the double take from the child. They're kind of like, what? You're supporting me. You're not just being this authority. You're not just being the general. And the rapport that's built in a short amount of time by your interaction within that play arena with children is phenomenal. And just that, it just constantly I've been involved with this for 4 years and it still blows me away about the value.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about Playwork is that it can be immediately useful. Like you can turn off this podcast and the next time you're with a child, count to 3 before you say anything when you start to feel the tingles of nerves, and there, like you're already like the Playwork is seeping in to your body. Or you can spend 10 years studying it, writing about it, traveling the world, meeting people. It's just such an ocean. It's such an ocean. And you can like enjoy it for a day and dip your toes in, or you can like be a sailor and sort of be out there in the deep. Yeah.
One of my favorite attributes of it is that it's accessible.
Yeah, it is. I just want to mention the Playwork Primer by Penny Wilson, which is a free sort of PDF booklet that she wrote. Penny Wilson wrote it. It's just such a beautiful resource that you can sort of print off at the office and take it out, drink it over coffee, and it's just really useful resource.
I'll put a link for it into the show notes. Cool. This is a great opportunity to talk about your podcast, so we can put that in the show notes as well.
Sure. I mean, the Playwork podcast is a podcast for people who love play, and anyone who listens to your podcast either knows everything that we talk about already or would love it. And my co-host is Morgan Lichter-Saxby, the co-founder of Pop-Up Adventure Play. And, we get the same questions all the time. How do I do this? What is Playwork? How do I start an adventure playground? And so we really talk through those questions and put it on the internet so that people, whenever they fall down the rabbit hole, it's there waiting for them.
Excellent. Going to that accessibility, there's a school in Brisbane, which is just close by to us. And it's a challenging community there, great community. They have their challenges. And during the COVID, schools got shut down, but there was some high risk activities. So the children were still coming to school in that community. So the principal thought it was a great opportunity to implement loose parts. So he converted his tennis courts into loose parts area for children to explore.
What a gift.
And the results he's had are phenomenal. He's had in 1 year for the high-risk children that were involved with this initial, just that program, there was a 70% drop in violent incidents in 1 year. Just due to the collaboration, and a 30% increase in attendance.
It's useful to have that quantifiable impact.
Yeah. It's equally as important to like hear that child's voice and be like, look at you when they're building something. Go, I can't believe you're letting us do this. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, let us have fun. I'm like, oh. So it's heavy. I do have.
It's a win-win.
Yes, absolutely. And we've got an Imaginasium, which is a 20-foot container filled full of loose parts and shelving units.
Totally.
So
Genius.
we ship that around like fire affected town in Victoria. We sent it down there for them recovering from the bushfires. Amazing impact. Next week, we've got over 2 days, we've got the Imaginasium going to a park in Logan, and it's set up with a fence and a bunch of volunteers. And it just got put online, advertised, who wants to come and play at this thing, and they put up photos. 2 days, 1,000 children have registered.
Yikes, that's alarming.
Yeah, but it showed you, like, how amazing is that?
Yeah,
for that community to be like, yes, we're in.
You've got buy-in.
Yeah,
it's our fundraising.
Yeah, I'm scared right now about it.
That's a lot of kids.
It's a
no
lot.
No saws there, maybe.
So I think I was like, cardboard. we need another container right now.
Right. Yeah.
I have a few questions for you from our community here in Australia. Yeah. We have 4 adventure playgrounds, and this is a question from Hayano from the Australian Institute of Play. He's like, we have 4 adventure playgrounds in the whole of Australia.
Yeah.
So what are your tips for people wanting to start or get involved with one?
I mean, we talked about starting small.
Yep.
So I would, echo that. Jill Wood, who's the founder of an adventure playground in Houston, Texas, at a school, she defined adventure playground in a way that makes a lot of sense to me, that might be useful to your questioner. And she calls an adventure playground time, space, and play work. An adventure playground is a place where play work is happening. It does not need to be, anything more than that. And a great place to start basically is reading that play work primer and look around for time and space that no one else has claimed and no one expects anything out of it. Yeah. So, Jill Wood, when she founded the adventure playground at the parish school, you should totally Google and look at their beautiful images. They're very inspiring space. She's at a school, and, there's a lot that needs to get done at school. That's important. But after school, people are less concerned about. So she's like, okay, after school, let's see what we can do. Where can we do it? Well, we can't use the playground at school because kids aren't allowed to paint or draw or, destroy it, basically. But they do have a field out back that floods twice a year that they can't build on and nobody cares about. So they're like, well, we'll take that. So I would say look for the time and the space that is low stakes and start small. I mean, if you're asking me.
No, absolutely. Making
like
it what
what's
I
at
hear
your fingertips
like,
already.
What's accessible? Do that.
Yeah, exactly. Don't overcomplicate it. For sure.
No paralysis of analysis here. From our friends at Camp Hill Osh, a bunch of them are trained in play work, and Osh in Australia is after school hours care.
Okay.
So it's children of school age that go before and after school. And they've got this, at Camp Hill, they've got a complete junkyard playground.
Cool.
Which is very abnormal. And it's within the premises of the school. But it's their own area. They've also started a little training advocacy group called the Outsiders. And a bunch of them are trained through pop-up play, and a bunch of them are studying currently through pop-up as well. So their practices are awesome. Yeah, there's a wait list, very long. And even the stories of the buy-in from the teachers over time, the buy-in from the parents over time, the outdoor classroom day, the International Outdoor Classroom Day, the school actually allocate time to send all children over to the Osh area to engage in play in outdoor classroom day.
Wow.
Which is
how long has that been growing? I mean, been around?
Probably, Angus is going to shoot me. But I'd say it would have been like 6-7 years, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
They're doing great stuff. So questions from his team as they delve into it. They had a staff meeting about it. So were there boundaries around tools that you observed in the land or in play work in general?
I'll say briefly.
I want to try to get away from just the land, because you're an expert in play work. So
Hardly, but yeah, I hear what you're
Hardly.
saying.
Modesty.
I mean, every place is different. Some places, it's what makes sense for your location, I think, is what a play worker would say. I can say at the land, like there are saws and hammers laying around anywhere at the bottom of a stream, or somewhere that you would expect a hammer to be. But lighters, for example, the play workers kept in their pockets. So there weren't lighters everywhere. I don't know why, but that was just like what worked for them. So, I mean, boundaries around tool use, it's like what works for you. Start small. Like you can use a hammer in this area, and then a year later, maybe you don't care about the area anymore. And I don't know what happens between A and B, but what are the boundaries that will make it possible to say yes?
Yeah.
Put those boundaries in place so that you can say yes.
That's a beautiful framing. I really like that. Like create the opportunity to say yes and work towards that. Because as
right.
boring adults, we generally start at no. Did you guys use a risk benefit assessment?
I mean, the land has a formal risk benefit assessment procedure, and every element that they incorporate, they fill out a whole form about it and talk about it together. And sometimes it's super complicated and sometimes it's not. It depends on how risky it is.
Was there any pushback from the community? You said it was very embedded, but was there anything that was shared with you about when they first started up, or that you see across other projects that you're involved with?
I mean, the ugliness is totally an issue. And that is it's a total disaster. Like visually, the fence is the idea of a fence is an interesting conversation in Playwork, because it does separate the playful world of children from the rest of the world. And ideally, children should be permitted and supported in being playful, like anywhere that they live. But in the absence of that opportunity, the fence protects the children from the outside world, the one that punishes them for behaving in X, Y, or Z, or would judge the way that the space looks and stuff like that. So
the fence is actually, although from a Playwork philosophy standpoint, it's like something you don't want, but from a practicality, it actually liberated the children.
I mean, that's a boundary that the land implemented to allow other things to happen. The fence helps with pushback about the aesthetic for sure.
Yeah.
There are other places that the community doesn't want like the Anarchy Zone in Ithaca, New York. When they first installed, they picked up their loose parts every night, put them in a shed, locked it up. And then in the morning they took them out. And they don't do that to the same degree anymore many years later. They started small. And they they're like, fine, we'll clean up, whatever. No big deal.
I was lucky to visit the Adventure Playground in Berkeley.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That was awesome. We'll put that one in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's such a destination. They have different kids every day. It's not a neighborhood. And so they have their own sort of way of dealing with that. You probably noticed that they have if you bring them a nail, they'll give you something. I kind of can't remember anymore, but you
have to recycle. You have to be able to recycle some nails to be able to get new ones.
Yes, right. So it incentivizes the kids to sort of do some hazard clearing.
Did the filming cause any adulteration to the play during it?
Yeah, totally. Of course it did. Definitely.
How so?
For sure.
Or can you unpack adulteration for the people listening?
I'm not sure if I can really define that well, but I think the spirit of the question is did, the kids perform for the camera? And in doing so, did I take them out of their authentic, what they might have been doing otherwise? Certainly the cameras are cool. We were there for 3 weeks, I'll say that. So there were times we got a little old. That said, Luke, who's a play worker there, shared with me that Ethan had never climbed the tree before we came, and he climbed when we were there. There's definitely some jokes that were told that may not have been told if I wasn't there filming. It was maybe trying to impress or amuse me. I don't know. It's hard to say. Hard for me to say. I think the play workers would probably have more to say about that because they know the kids so well. But yes, absolutely. And I think that it's a to me, it means that like whatever I make with this material better be worth it, because I totally like went into their world and siphoned out, these images. And so the images better be like, better honor what's going on in there.
Now, your
Because,
main role now is as a parent. So how is play working impacted how you operate as a parent?
It certainly tests my comfort with risk taking, for sure.
So having a child has like changed that lens, given you a bit more of a risk reflex lens.
Oh, wildly so. Oh yeah, big time. Big time. I just want to, protect I want to protect him, my little chick.
Yeah.
So I always appreciate when people push back on me, he'll be fine, he can do it. Or,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not like a total freak or anything, but I definitely sometimes am surprised where I'm like, just shut up, Erin, stop talking, be quiet, step back.
Apart
It's
from
a practice.
telling yourself,
I mean, playwork is a practice. Playwork is a practice, and it's a skill, it's a muscle. So
do you have any
I'm lucky
techniques to get over your fear reflex for parents listening?
The thing that I went to the land and it changed me. And when I came back, I talk. So, and this has sustained even as a parent, I talk so much, 90% less. I am way more silent now when I'm around kids than I ever was. I've become, I think it's like baked in now, aware of how little they really need me in their playful moments.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly like, I default that they don't need me unless they're asking for me. If they're looking me in the eye, if they're extending their hand in my direction, then there's a sign that they need me. Otherwise, I don't assume that they need me. I mean, it's a heartbreaking thing. It's what's hard about playwork is it's so humbling, It's like, it's not about me. It's not about what I want to do. It's not about what I think is cool, interesting, or should come next. It's not about how I feel. It's not about my hurt feelings, what I think is right or wrong.
Yeah. So that teaches you about your active agenda or even passive agenda. You're like, don't have a conscious thought, but then when you catch yourself, you're like, I completely hijacked everything.
I turned that into a teaching moment in the middle of their whatever. I turned that into a teaching moment. I wasted it. I ruined it. It's not about that.
And
teaching moments are for some other time. Yeah.
And that's a thing about that contrast, isn't it? It's between thinking that everything has to be a teaching moment. When what's our role as a parent? We're like there to teach them and show them and do the growing for them.
Yeah. On our timeline too.
Yeah. I think it's a disservice to your child if you create a world where there's not failure, risk, independence. Because when do you want them to fall? When they can fall and then extend a hand to you, or when they're a teen, when their fall is and their counsel is a peer that is probably going through something similar.
It definitely gets harder as the kids get older, not just my own child, but just children in general. Like it's, play-based preschool was awesome. Kindergarten, cool. First grade, okay, hippies. Second grade, seventh grade, as the kids grow, it's like less valued their playful lives. And so I think that's what's interesting to me too, as a parent, to be so invested in these kids, like not just my kid, but all, how when you have a kid, all the kids, you love them all. And it's like he's going into kindergarten, and I'm thinking, does that mean his playful life is over, or it's going to be reduced by half? Like, that's interesting. That's sort of where I'm at in my life right now, thinking about that.
Matt Robson from Learning Through Landscapes in the UK, like their main focus at the moment is play for teens, because they've had like nice traction and they're getting there with those earlier years, but they're like, nothing's happening. And within surveys that have been done and executed by him, the response has been, no, they don't play, so you don't need to come here. Which is sad.
Yeah, not probably
What
true.
type of play does your child engage with? Where? How? What?
Where, how, what?
Where, how, what?
I mean, he's in preschool. He goes to he's very lucky to go to like a wonderful preschool. And at home we have, sandbox, big grassy field. He has a very playful life. He likes vehicles, sand, Transformers. I don't know.
It's all
He's
a
just
combination.
little kid. Yeah. Oh, one thing about when I was growing up is I was one of the older kids. So I was 12 or 13 playing with like 6, 7, 8, 10-year-olds. And so I always felt like I was like very unusual in my own peer group, and that I did have a sort of playful outlet,
Yeah.
because our sort of gang of kids, we all started, I was 7 and they were babies, whatever, but we all kind of grew up together, and I just sort of hung on a little longer than some of the other kids did, or were able to.
Yeah, you got a little bit more before we got boring adults into agendas. What advice do you have for educators, parents, about letting your children engage in not only just loose parts and adventure style play, but risk?
I think maybe,
all right, let's reframe
find
this.
your people. Go ahead.
Get it make it more emotive for you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself about having a child enter the world? What would you look back and give advice pre-child to yourself?
Well, one thing that I think is important about Playwork is that Playwork is working directly with the kids, but it's also navigating the boring, stupid adult world on behalf of children, right? It's filing the permits, advocating at the stupid, boring council meeting, getting signatures, petition signatures, applying for grants, cutting off grown-ups at the pass, who are coming in to intervene. It's all of that other work that's so important. And I think that like the best play workers are awesome with the kids, but they're awesome with the adults. Yeah. They're awesome at engaging adults, at bringing them in, talking them down, and doing the advocacy. It's advocacy work. It's community organizing. It's like a community, a society that's safe and healthy for children is safe and healthy for everyone. And I think that's like one of the really special, important things happening in Playwork. So it's not exactly your question, but
that's great.
It's not about parenting. You know what I mean? I think that it gets sort of like easily sort of mushes into a conversation about parenting, mushes into a conversation about schools, but Playwork is its own thing. It's community work. It's advocacy work for disempowered, underrepresented community of citizens, children. And it's also very like rewarding, intellectually stimulating, rich. So.
And what excites you most about being involved in the world of Playwork and being that Playwork evangelist?
Yeah, this is when I just sound like a religious nut, basically. But it's just so true. I think there's so much truth in it. It's about like, I don't find it to be hypocritical. It stands up, it's solid. It's a really deep and like loving field. It's wonderful.
It is. It's an act of love and kindness to advocate for our children. And thank you on behalf of everyone that's been inspired and by watching the land, the amazing message that you were able to get out to the world. Thank you for inspiring me and opening my eyes to that whole world as well. So thank you so much
for knowing the film. I appreciate that.
Not at all. Thanks for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thanks.